I'm Dr. Lynette Louise, otherwise known as the Brain Broad, because I travel with this big brain and this little brain and this brain, whatever size you think it is. Um, and I'm here to do the fourth in this little playlist series on the effect that you as a parent and your beliefs and the things that you think um, you want to be, you aspire to be, affect your children. So, and as promised, I'm going to tell you a story from my life this time instead of one of my clients. But before I do that, I want to remind you to like and subscribe. Oh, I'm so proud of myself because I never care about that. Okay, there. Like and subscribe. Please share. Tell people to pay attention to these little tips because I really do believe they're life changing. They took me a lifetime to learn, which will be evidenced by this story. So, in case you don't know, I adopted 6 children. Well, legally I adopted 4 children, plus I took legal custody of 2, but it's all the same to me. And I already had 2 children that I was raising that were biologically my own. So I ended up with 8 children, and 5 of the 8 were diagnosed with various things. 6 of the 8 all came from lives of abuse. And as a result of adopting them, I believe even my biological children were raised in a way that one could call abusive because they had to deal with all of the behaviors and the things that I had to deal with the adopted children. And then we had to sort of make that work. And there were certainly a lot of challenges in that. So you can just imagine what it was like when I had all of them. But I'm going to take you to even before that, when I first adopted Dar. So at this point, I had 2 biological children, and I had just adopted this young man who I'd already met and been caring for about a year while I tried to adopt him. And he was extremely challenged. They thought he was a feral child. They thought, he's retarded, uneducatably retarded was the diagnosis, possibly a feral child, possibly locked in a closet for years, possibly autistic, possibly this, possibly that. Basically, he was a growling, grunting, drooling, eating everything in the house kind of guy, as in walls and mattresses and whatever he could sink his teeth into. He had a lot of issues, totally nonverbal, total difficulty with making his body do what you were asking him to make his body do. He could walk, but he couldn't point. He couldn't copy. He was just a real challenge. And I was in the process of trying to adopt some other children, and that's a whole story. I'd already met them as well. But while I was doing that, I was 100% focused on Dar because my other children were in school all day, and I could go, all right, I'm going to fix you. You're my problem to solve, right? I'm going to give you all of my love and all of my attention and all of my teaching skills. And wow, was that ever too much for him? But I didn't know that, of course, because I was doing it. I was doing it out of love. I was constantly on top of him, constantly hypervigilant, constantly aware of every move he made. He was a child who actually couldn't even close his eyes to sleep. We had to close them for him with padding and then tape, and then untape him in the mornings because he couldn't learn on his own to close his eyes. And I had tried for like over a year at this point when I finally went, okay, I'll do the padding. So he couldn't swallow on his own. He couldn't chew on his own. He was really challenged. And I was teaching. I was on top of every move he made. I was helping him potty train. I was helping him, make eye contact. I was helping him copy. I was getting in the way of him learning those things. So I had all this energy for it and all this focus. And it wasn't until I adopted 3 other special needs children, multiply handicapped, on the spectrum of autism with fetal alcohol syndrome and all kinds of other stuff, at one time, 3 brothers. And it wasn't until I did that that I saw Dar, who had had all this individual attention from me, I saw him relax a bit, not have such a big startle reflex, try some things, be inquisitive. And I realized, oh my gosh, I was worried that adopting the other guys was going to get in the way of me helping Dar, but in fact, I had been getting in the way because he had been my problem to solve. Speaking of Dar, no, Dar, I'm doing a tape. Out you go, out you go, I'll be with you in a minute. He's still here. But he's much more capable. As you could see, he listened. Anyway, that was like on cue. I finally realized, you know, children learn if we enrich their environment. But when we overwhelm their environment, when we're trying to fix them, they feel their brokenness. And I promised you in the other videos that I would give you kind of an idea of what happens when the whole family circles around one challenged child or one sick person. It's called sick person personality. The whole family gets a personality and the person who's sick gets one. So the sick person starts to live into the expectation. And this is also true if you have a disability of some kind, an invisible disability, a visible one. You start to live into the expectation that everyone around you has. And the people around you get cemented into their help position. And it's really hard to make progress when you're doing that. As soon as I made this enormous change where there was much less of me to go around and much more chaos that I had to put into position and make an enriched environment rather than a chaotic one, Dar started to respond. Now, he was still extremely special. He still is. But he became, I don't know, more in his skin, more comfortable, more willing to close his eyes to go to sleep. It still took time. All these things still took time, and they still do. But I would never again want to circle an entire family unit around his needs. I do want them accommodated for. I do want him factored in. But I don't want everybody to behave according to what he needs. And an example of that happened at the park just recently. I haven't seen this behavior in 4 years. And it might be just because he was nervous of the vaccine that was coming the next day, which I'm going to close on. But at any rate, it also could be the lady that was talking to me because she was desperate and talking about her abusive husband. And she'd seen me at the park before and she was like, oh, good, I can talk to you for free, right? So she was pouncing all over me with her energy and her fear. And whatever was the reason, Dar started acting out in a way I hadn't seen him in a long time. He was like, making all these noises and and I could have said, okay, you have to stop talking to me and focused on Dar. But that would have taught him, oh yeah, that thing you used to do years ago, it works. And I wasn't about to do that. So no matter why he was acting that way, I deal with behavior first. Why second? Unless it's very obvious and very important, like a bee sting and he's having a reaction or something. So she's like, should I leave? I go, only if you want to teach him to act like that, but you know, if you're uncomfortable, go ahead and leave. And I just like kept telling him, no, you sit in that spot as mad as you are, but you sit in that spot until you feel better. And I kept talking to her. And I didn't really want to be talking to her. I wanted to attend to him. But I am very aware that I don't want to teach that lesson. I don't want everyone to go, oh, he's acting like that. We should listen to his behavior and we should all stop talking and give him quiet. And I know y'all are doing that, a bunch of you. But it's definitely going to have negative consequences in the end. Now understand, of my 8 children, Dar is the only one who's still dependent. And they were multiply handicapped. So unless they were as handicapped as Dar, they've made their way in the world. They've become independent, they've gotten married, they've had children, they have careers. And they're all different. And, you know, I'd have to tell a story for each of them for you to know that. But they were all super challenged in various ways. And they all made their way because they weren't as impacted in their body as Dar. And their history wasn't quite as bad. But Dar is still better than he would be. He'd probably be that person that you're medicating in order to keep him from hitting people or hitting himself or that sort of thing. And he doesn't do any of that. And he's never been on medication. Well, I shouldn't say that. When I first got him, he was on medication. But in my hands, he's not on medication. So you don't have to go that route. It's not bad if you do. Sometimes it's great if you do. But I want you to know that if you deal with behavior first and don't let yourself become a part of this sick person personality, but rather teach to independence, respond with the idea of, I want him to be able to be independent. I want him to be able to go to the park where other people are and not scare him. I want him to be able to stand in line at the grocery store when we're standing in line. All these things. Then you will get there because your eye's in the right place. And you get what you go for. You really do. Maybe not the pure vision you had, but you get what you go for. Just don't cement them in place because they have a diagnosis, and take responsibility for their behavior, and you'll get some benefits. And to really close that out, I'm going to talk about the pandemic. Seems appropriate. When the pandemic first came, I remember thinking, how am I going to get him to wear a mask? He's very sensory. And I'm like, listen to you. You're talking like everybody you teach. Stop that. So I took this as an opportunity to teach. Do it like other people do it, get used to the sensory difference, make a change in your sensory system. And I just said, I know you'll have to come in the store with me, but you can't come in unless you wear the mask, so I'm leaving you in the car. So he's capable of that. That's very safe. And I did that maybe 3 times. And then by the 4th time I said, well, you can wear a mask, and then you can come in. So he's been great with the mask. I had to keep putting it back on him at first, of course. And when we traveled in an airplane, he kept wanting to take it off or pull it down so he could breathe through his nose, and I kept putting it back. But he's just fine, and it's more than a mask. There's so many people fighting about this stuff, but it was an opportunity for me to say, look, the world that you're looking at is doing this, and you're doing it too. And we're all the same, and we all have the same rules. And you can be a part of that. And it was the same with the vaccine. I had a lot of questions about that because I don't normally vaccinate due to some things that I've seen happen. And personally, not because of data or anything. That's a whole other video. But normally we don't. And I thought, well, this is a different circumstance. I don't blanket decide. I go, all right, so what is this vaccine? Which vaccine would I want if I wanted any? And I thought, because of Dar's startle reflex when you unexpectedly touch him, and because of his fear of a blood draw, I thought, we're going to have to tie him down to do it. And I kept worrying about it. And I went for my vaccine. I finally decided, okay, I'm going to do Pfizer because I want to travel, and that's the one I want to do. So I went, and I brought him with me so he could see me do it. And I said to them, so would you be willing to let me tie him down? And I set this up so badly. And they're like, oh, I don't know. Let me see. Let me talk to people, right? And so now they're afraid of him. They do my vaccine, and I go, oh, wow, I didn't feel a thing. So since I didn't feel a thing, he wouldn't have a startle reflex if I just keep him from looking. I've overcompensated. You hear that? So now I've set him up to be the bad guy. I go to the people and I say, okay, I realize I didn't feel a thing. We'll be all right. We don't need to tie him up. And they're like, oh, no, we can't vaccinate him. We're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. Now, this was my fault. I set this up wrong. And so now I'm arguing with them. I'm like, disability laws and all this stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute, Lynette, just go somewhere else. It's like when you call and you get an unhelpful operator, hang up and dial back. So I went, just go somewhere else. So I just walked away, let my emotions settle. I'm like, no, he wasn't rejected, Lynette. This was your fault. You set this up wrong. I talked to Dar, you want to do it? And he's, yes, I want to do it. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to get you an appointment somewhere else. And it was great. That somewhere else had calming music playing, not the hyper music that was playing at the one that we had just been to. It was empty. The lady was great. She let me be the one to clean his arm so that I could sort of lean over his body and cover his eye and say, okay, go. And she gave him the inoculation, and he stood up and clapped his hands. He was so proud, and we went for soda, and it was over in seconds. So what's the lesson? Your expectations create your results. And if I'd have stayed in that fight with that first place, I could have spent a whole year angry, hurt, setting Dar up to feel like he can't do it. We might even have ended up tying him down. And really, it was all my fault. I just didn't check it out first. So, check it out. Take a minute to say, what is it I want to see happen here? Do I want to see me spend the next year yelling and screaming and crying because you're not accepting my son or helping him properly? Or do I want to see us tying him down and making him feel like this is a terrible thing? Or do I want to go in and have this successful moment where it was all really easy and everyone was very nice and we went and he got us a soda because he never gets to have soda and that was his prize? Sometimes we want the misery as parents, the martyrdom, the gee, my life is hard. And when we want that, we get it. So just pay attention. I'm always teaching myself. I'm like, Lynette, pay attention. You know how to do this, do it, right? So look at what you're trying to create and create that. Don't be part of sick person personality. Like and subscribe. Oh, I don't have to do that. Look, I learned a skill. I didn't really learn it because I keep relearning it. Bye.